Sometimes the deepest kind of betrayal isn't when a stranger hurts you. It's when the person you raised with your own two hands looks at you like a burden. I'm Linda Harper. I'm 62, and this Thanksgiving, my son slapped me. But this isn't a story about staying broken. It's a revenge story. The quiet kind, the kind women like me learn to craft after a lifetime of being silenced. The day before Thanksgiving, I was on my knees in the living room, scrubbing the baseboards. No one was going to notice them. Not Brett, not his wife Megan, certainly not my 10-year-old grandson Max. But I cleaned them anyway, like always. That's the thing about mothers like me. We keep doing the invisible work, long after it's been forgotten. I'd been living in this little Florida house for 12 years now. Bought it after Frank, my husband, passed. Life insurance covered half. The rest came from 30 years of working double shifts as a nurse. My back still aches from those nights I worked straight through till morning, then came home to pack Brett's lunch and iron his shirt for school. This house is all I've got left of those years. It's not fancy, but it's mine. And I kept it running, roof to flooring, like I did everything in this family. Quietly, competently, alone. Brett called that afternoon to check in. "Still good for tomorrow?" he asked, voice half distracted. "We're bringing wine, and Max's new VR thing. You'll love it." I smiled. Of course, turkey's already brining. Table's set. He hesitated. "Also, just FYI, I may have a few ideas for the house I'd love to show you. Megan's been sketching up some redesigns. Might be time to rethink the layout." I paused, hand on the windowsill. "This house?" "Yeah," he said. Open concept, cleaner lines. It'd be a great space for something modern. Plus, if my company grows like we think, it might double as an offsite." My jaw clenched, but I said nothing. I've spent my whole life not making scenes, taking deep breaths, smiling when I'm supposed to, especially with Brett, but something in his voice, it wasn't a suggestion, it was ownership. That night, after I polished the silver, I sat in the quiet of the dining room, the room I'd painted by hand, and whispered, "You don't even see me anymore, do you?" Tomorrow, he'd arrive like a guest in the home I built with my grief and my grit, and I would greet him like I always had, with warmth. But this year, something in me had shifted. I just didn't know it yet. I always told myself Thanksgiving wasn't about the food, but this year, I had made everything from scratch, even the cranberry sauce, even though nobody ever touched it. I guess part of me wanted to believe I still mattered, that maybe effort still meant something. Brett arrived late, as usual. Megan walked in ahead of him, talking loud, acting like she lived here. Max ran straight to the TV, already pulling wires out of his backpack for some virtual game. "You're quiet today, Mom," Brett said as he dropped the wine on the counter without looking at me. "Just tired," I smiled. "Been cooking since Tuesday." We sat down to eat. I'd lit the nice candles, folded napkins the way my mother used to. For a moment, it almost felt like it used to. Before Frank died, before Brett started seeing me as a utility. But then Brett tapped his glass with a spoon. "We wanted to share something exciting," he said. "Harper Tech's expanding. We're launching a new satellite space in the spring. And we've decided this house would be the perfect location." The room went still. I looked at him, thinking maybe he was joking. "You mean here?" "Yeah, it's just sitting here. You've got the space, and Mom, let's be honest, you don't really need all of this." Megan jumped in, smiling way too wide. "We've even mocked up a new floor plan. Open concept, clean walls. The dining room could be a perfect demo space." I felt my face go hot. My fingers curled around the fork. "Brett," I said slowly, "this is my home." He leaned back like I'd offended him. "Mom, we're just trying to do something smart with the family's resources." The family's resources. That's what I had become, not a mother, not a woman, just resources. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been talked about like you weren't in the room? Like your whole life, your love, your sacrifices could be erased with a business pitch? Drop A in the comments if you've ever felt like that, because I know I'm not the only one. Back at that table, Brett pulled out a folder. "These are just early drafts," he said. "Legal's got everything prepped. All you'd need to do is sign. It'll make things easier." I didn't even open it. Instead, I looked at my son, the boy I once held through croupy nights, the boy I stood beside at every science fair, and in that moment, I realized he was gone. Not missing, just replaced. After dinner, I started clearing the plates. It's funny, no matter how much things change, some habits stay. I could have waited. I could have let Megan help, but I didn't. Maybe part of me needed to move, just to keep from falling apart. I carried the turkey platter into the kitchen and set it down a little too hard. My hands were shaking. Behind me, Brett followed. His voice was lower now, more clipped. "So what's the issue, Mom? You don't trust us?" I turned around, drying my hands on the dish towel. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," he snapped. "You've always been like this, suspicious, stuck in your ways. You think because you raised me, you get to control everything forever?" "I'm not trying to control anything," I said quietly. "I'm just not ready to hand over my home like it's a spare key." He stepped closer. "You think you built this life alone? You think Dad would have wanted you hoarding it like some relic?" That's when I saw it. The look in his eyes. Cold, sharp, like I was just another obstacle to move around. I barely registered the slap. It came fast, a crack of sound, a flash of white behind my eyes, and then the sting bloomed across my cheek. The dish towel dropped to the floor. I stumbled back, hit the edge of the counter. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it, but the silence behind me told me I hadn't. Megan stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Max had paused his game in the living room. Even the music had stopped. I straightened slowly. The burn in my cheek was nothing compared to the hollowness settling in my chest. Brett's face shifted, from fury to something like guilt, then back to blank. I looked at him, really looked at him, and what I saw wasn't a son, not anymore. "I wiped your fevers at 2 a.m., I said, voice shaking. "Slept in plastic chairs outside hospital rooms, gave up everything so you wouldn't have to struggle. And this is what I get?" He didn't answer. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled. It wasn't for him. It was for me. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do next, and I knew I wouldn't need anyone's permission to do it. I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. My cheek throbbed with every heartbeat. But that wasn't what kept me awake. It was the silence that followed. No one came upstairs. No one knocked. No one texted to see if I was okay. That kind of silence is its own kind of violence. By 5 a.m., I was in my robe, at the dining room table, flipping through my lockbox of documents, the one Frank and I kept in a fireproof safe, marriage license, insurance policies, and finally, what I was looking for, the original loan agreement. The house was in my name, always had been. But 3 years ago, when Brett begged me to help him secure a business loan, I'd stood as guarantor. I remember the day. He brought over Max, made pancakes, and said, "You're the only one I trust, Mom." I didn't know then that trust could be a tactic, but I had my name on every line that mattered, and deep in the paperwork was a clause I'd forgotten about. Clause 9B, Lender Protection Rights. If I ever suspected misuse or fraud, I could request a freeze pending investigation. I didn't hesitate. I called the bank's legal hotline and cited the clause. By noon, HarperTech's operating account was flagged for review. Then I made another call. To Miriam Halberd, my estate attorney. She'd helped me set up a protective trust 2 years after the loan, something I'd done quietly, after seeing how fast Brett burned through investor money. "Miriam," I said, "it's time." She didn't ask questions, just said, "Come in this afternoon." I hung up and sat back in the kitchen chair I'd had since 1985. Same spot I'd rocked Brett to sleep when he was teething. Same spot I'd cried in the night Frank died. I looked out the window. The sun was starting to rise, golden and soft. The light hit the edge of the kitchen counter, the place where my son's hand had struck me. But I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt focused. He'd erased me in front of my own family, but now I was erasing his power, legally, permanently. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Quiet, lawful, undeniable. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. By the following week, the legal wheels were already turning. Miriam filed the transfer documents, and just like that, the deed to the house was no longer tied to me or Brett. It now belonged to a nonprofit I'd quietly supported for years, the Forgotten Mothers Fund, a small but powerful organization that provided housing for elderly women who'd been left behind by their families. Women like me. I moved out that same afternoon, packed only what I needed, left the good china behind. I didn't even leave a note. My new apartment sat above a florist shop on the edge of town. Small, quiet, nothing fancy, but the sunlight streamed through the kitchen window in the morning, and no one raised their voice there. It smelled like eucalyptus and lavender. Peace. I used to think I needed a big house to feel safe, but now I knew I just needed a place where no one saw me as a liability. 3 days after I left, Brett called, 8 times. I didn't answer. Not when he texted, "Mom, this is all a misunderstanding." Not when he sent a photo of Max holding a sign that said, "Come home." If you think guilt always shows up in the form of apologies, you've never met someone who only apologizes when their money's in danger. 2 days later, the freeze on Harper Tech's accounts hit public record. Investors pulled out. His business partner jumped ship. And Megan? Gone. Left a note on Instagram about needing space and healing. I didn't gloat. I didn't toast to karma. Instead, I volunteered at the local shelter on Thursdays. I learned how to propagate roses. I read the book club novels I used to buy and never open. I went to the grocery store without worrying someone would ask me to co-sign something. It was a strange feeling, not being needed, but it was also a relief. One afternoon, a letter came from Max. In his shaky handwriting, it read, "Dear Grandma, I don't understand everything, but I saw what Dad did. I think it was wrong. I miss your grilled cheese. I hope you're okay. Love, Max." I pressed the letter to my heart and closed my eyes. That's all I needed. Not forgiveness, not revenge, just to know someone saw me, really saw me. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the old garden behind what used to be my house. Only now, it wasn't mine. It didn't belong to Brett either. It belonged to the women who truly needed it, just like I once did. The Forgotten Mothers home had just welcomed its 5th resident. A woman named Joyce had moved in last week. Her story? Left on Christmas Eve by a daughter she raised alone. No phone call, no explanation, just gone. I helped Joyce unpack her last box yesterday. She cried when she saw the kitchen. "It feels like someone cared enough to build this for us," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just smiled and nodded. The truth is, I had built it for them, but not out of bitterness, out of recognition. For every woman who sat quietly at her own table, wondering when she'd stopped being a person and started being a problem. As for Brett, I hear he's living in a rental on the west side now. The startup collapsed after the audits. Investors filed a civil suit. He tried to frame it as a market crash, but people talk in this town. Everyone knows what happened. Not the full story, but enough. He never called again. Max writes sometimes, always handwritten, always simple. His last letter said, "Grandma, I told Dad you were the strongest person I've ever known." He didn't say anything, but I could tell he knew it too. That's all I ever wanted. Not power, not pity, just to be seen, to be remembered for the life I gave, not the one they tried to take from me. These days I wake up early and sit with a cup of tea on the porch. Not my porch anymore, but close enough. I watch the ocean breathe in and out and feel no need to explain where I've been. This story won't make headlines. There won't be applause or standing ovations, but there's a quiet kind of justice in watching the world go on without the weight of someone else's version of who you should have been. I'm Linda Harper. I'm 62, and I'm finally free. To my viewers, if you've ever felt like your love, your sacrifices, your presence were taken for granted, if you've ever been treated like a burden by the very people you gave everything to, type "I understand" in the comments. Because I promise you, someone out there sees you, and your story matters more than you know.